So Mary and I, we live literally 3 minutes walk away from each other, which is a real blessing. And today's session is quite an informal one. It is just two mums who've been through pretty much anything and everything that home education, well, combined, we've been through pretty much anything and everything that being home educating families can throw at you. And just hoping to share a little bit of what we've learned. And we might even possibly find some of you've got better solutions, you know, in how we handle things, but this is the place to talk about it. So I'm going to let Mary start by introducing herself and just giving you a little background on herself and her family.
Brilliant. I'm Mary, married to Richard. We've been married for coming up for 21 years. We've got 3 children. Samuel's 19, Holly is 17, James has just turned 16. We started home educating when Samuel was in year 1, but had already started thinking about it when he was about a toddler. We were privileged to meet a family who'd got 5 children who were home educating. So it was on our radar, but we found what we thought would be a lovely small school for him. But actually, due to his special educational needs, we decided actually it wasn't working. And that we would home educate. So our youngest 2 children never went to school until they went to post 16. So James is in his last year of home education, and he will be, in theory, he would have finished this summer, but obviously due to COVID, he's got 2 outstanding GCSEs that he's going to have to take when the exam season opens. Samuel was also doing an A-level from home, and same situation for him. So we've just got to wait. So I will still be home educating next year for a little bit, although to be honest, we're at the stage where the kids just get on with it themselves, and I dip in and out. I've also gone back to work in the last 2 years. So some of it very, very part-time. So I was just doing a day and a half. I'm now up to 3 days, and from September I'll be full-time, and I'm a year 3 teacher at a local Catholic school. So that's me. Over to Juliet.
Okay, so I've got a bit of a treat for you. I dragged up an old slideshow so I could at least illustrate a little bit of our journey and make it maybe a little more interesting. So let's just hope this is going to work. I want to make sure I'm showing you the right one. Okay, I think that's it there. Okay, so hopefully, is the picture coming up of my family? And
not yet. Oh, there is, yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you can see a picture of my family. So this is back in South Africa. You can see my children are little barefoot hooligans. They actually, no, they were really good kids. And we had 3 of them and a bun in the oven. And we decided to start home educating because my oldest was having difficulty at school, and we tried to resolve it, and it just wasn't working. And my husband happened to pick up a magazine with an article on home education, and that kind of started our journey. So this was the 3 of them. So Lauren was 7, and Mallory was about 5, yeah, 4 going on 5, and Kentley was, I think, 3 then. They're quite close in age. And we had a lovely home ed life. We had a lovely garden, so the children could, you know, we could do all of the things that the ideal home educating family you'd imagine can do. We had the entire Sunlight curriculum for every year for every child. We were part of a community, this was a drama group that we set up, acting out a play that we all wrote together. We got together with friends, did science experiments, and it was all like wonderful. And we lived in this wonderful home with a huge garden, 1.5 acres of land. And on the right, you can see our this area here to the right, which is our extension, which housed an entire schoolroom, as we called it, which was like that big. And it was ideal We had loads of space to do everything for the children to have some quiet space to play, to do art, to do everything. We could even have gatherings in there. And true to form, a year later, we moved house, as you do. So I'm just going to stop the share right there because that's a bit of the background, and I want to just make sure that I don't go to the next thing.
Juliet, I'll just show my photographs.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I have to clarify. Juliet just told us before we started that she'd got some photographs. So I've just grabbed the photographs off the wall so you can see. So this is my kids when we first started, if you can see it. So Samuel's in the blue, Holly's obviously in the red, and James is in the middle. And this is them now. So it goes Samuel from the oldest is there, Holly, and James. There you are. So they survived. They survived home education, and they have come out of it. There we are. Over to you, Juliet. Let's start with. You're muted, Juliet.
Yeah. I'm unmuted now. So I'm going to go back to just sharing the screen just to show you, Mary and I sort of came up with a little system to help us kind of just structure what we wanted to share on today. And we used the good old alphabet. And so we've got A, B, C, D, E, F. And the first thing we're going to talk about is our approaches to home education. So what approach did we take, and did that change? You know, how we adapted that as we went along. So Mary, you go for it then.
Okay, so we first off, so I'll probably give you some explanation actually. When we first started home educating, Samuel had a diagnosis of autism. As we progressed through home education, he also got a diagnosis of dyslexia. So we took him out of school. He was functioning on about a 3-year-old's level. So initially it was just about play, and he loved telling stories. So we did lots and lots of reading, and then he would act out the stories. We'd work together. The younger two, that first year, were still in the playgroup, a really good Christian playgroup around the corner from us that just allowed me to drop them off when I wanted to, which invariably was late. The Nevins never go anywhere on time. And then, but the days that we were out and about with other home educators, they just didn't go. As the years progressed, that sort of reading and having those read alouds, we kept those all the way through, and we dipped in and out of lots of things. So I got our books from looking at Sunlight curriculum, looking at Simply Charlotte Mason, looking at Ambleside, and then we also picked up a bit later on Mystery of History, and that then became our sort of core theme, and then we bolt on things from there. In terms of maths, that's probably the one thing that we started with, and up until GCSE we actually stuck with it. We did Maths UC, and then switched obviously for GCSE just because of needing to go from an American curriculum to a UK one. English, we dipped in lots and lots of things. We've done Jolly Phonics, we did Explode the Code, we did Galore Park, we did learning literature curriculum. To be honest, I'm a bit of a curriculum junkie. I quite like thinking, oh, that looks brilliant, let's buy that. I mean, we have given away hundreds of pounds of worth of stuff over the years just because I bought it, thought, oh, this is brilliant, and actually we never used it, or we used it for a little bit, or we used it with one child. Some of the stuff that we've got, my youngest child's very kinesthetic learner. He just about tolerated read alouds. And the only way he would do that is to have Lego on the floor or something that he was playing with, and he had to be in the vicinity because that's what I said, but he needed to be doing something else, and he would just listen alongside. We did lots of, we've got a lovely garden where we live. We moved, in fact, this is my eldest who's just come in the room. We moved about when my children were sort of 7, 5 and 3 to this house, and we're really fortunate. We live in the city, but we've got quite a good sized garden, so we did lots of home ed out in the garden, particularly if the weather was nice like it is today. So yeah, over to you, Juliet.
Okay, so as I said earlier, when we started out, as so many do, we thought, we need to be organized, we need to have a good curriculum. And we'd been to a talk where someone had shared about sunlight, and we were very taken with sunlight. So we literally bought the full, curriculum for my daughter, who was in, like she was seven going on 8 at the time. And then I had what they would call kindergarten and a preschooler, and we got everything. And it was kind of okay initially because I only had one that was doing properly a lot of formal schoolwork coming straight out of school. Although I tore my hair out pretty much because of her with the maths, which was the issue and the reason we'd taken her out of school in the first place, because she'd somehow learnt to cope at school by guessing the answers. So she'd never actually learned how to work out the answers. And so when all of this was when I was working with her, sort of finding out how she actually didn't really know, and she'd been guessing and just thought that she was stupid because she guessed the wrong answer. And I think she thought the clever kids guessed the right answer, so she must be stupid. So that was kind of how we got started. So we started very structured, and it was all very lovely curriculum, but very full on. And I was expecting my 4th child at the time. So understandably, it got a little hectic, but we were kind of, able to be a bit relaxed. I had friends and mentors that could sort of let me not get too strung out. But and Sunlight is a beautiful curriculum, and the books are beautiful, and we did enjoy it, and we did enjoy ticking off when we'd done everything every day. But after a couple of years, it was quite hard because I was trying to do everything for every child in their year, and I eventually changed my approach slightly. So I said, okay, you have to do your maths for every day. That's for your age level, and you have to do your language arts, which was kind of like Explode the Code and your Winston Grammar, whatever it was. And but everything else we're going to just do the same. So all the read alouds, I would choose something was kind of in the middle of ability, not necessarily to the oldest, not necessarily to the youngest. And we all joined in with that. With the nature books, we just did everything. We did our science together. Because I found that actually they all managed to pick up on their, and I would expect them to respond according to the age level. So for instance, if we were doing a science experiment, the oldest one might write down everything about the science experiment, but the youngest might draw a picture about what we were doing. And so they all just chipped in according to their ability. Another thing that I introduced, and I think it is a really wise thing to introduce, and that is a 4-day week. So that helped me a lot. So we worked Monday to Thursday, and Fridays we had fun. So Friday we actually we used to get together with some other families, and we would do something shared. So we would work on the Egyptians, or but it was fun. The kids didn't see that as it was, wasn't hard. And we would have lunch together, and that just made a lovely ending to the week. And I strongly recommend looking, if you are going to go for a structured or bookwork approach, try and give yourself a day off a week. And then what actually happened is we went into, so when I was introducing myself earlier, we eventually went on to have 7 children. But when I had 5 children expecting 6, we moved from that idyllic, lovely home with a great big schoolroom overlooking the garden. We moved, and we still had a big property. We moved on to a small holding, but the house was very, very much more limited. And not only that, within 6 months of us being there, my parents moved in with us, because the plan had been we would build them a place, and then we moved house, but my husband had committed to taking them on, so they moved into the house with us. And not only that, when we moved house, for 6 weeks everything had to go into storage because the buyer, the seller of the property, got a bit difficult, and we had South Africa, it all works a little differently. So for 6 weeks everything was in storage, and I was there with these 5 children and pregnant, and having to figure out, staying in a guest house. and trying to figure out to do in that time. And then we finally got into our house, but by the time we'd unpacked everything, it was Christmas, so nothing much happened. By the time that was over, my 6th child was due to be born, and then 3 months later my parents moved in with us. So that kind of time was a bust. Everything was thrown up in the air, and by that I also then had teenagers, and then we had a lot of difficulty just with space for the children to actually have like a working space or a table or whatever. It was very cramped. And my older daughter then my husband wanted her to do IGCSE, and she wasn't really interested. She's not particularly academic, and her head was being filled with makeup and clothes and boys and that kind of thing, due to some of the friends she made. So that was very difficult. And then, yeah, so everything went out the window pretty much from then on. We muddled along, and then 4 years after that, and another child later, we moved to the UK, and then that actually just threw things even into threw us into even another sort of tailspin that took us about 3-4 years to recover from. And so our journey's been quite a difficult one, and I will share some more perhaps later on, just share some of the slides where I recap some of those things, and we will cover some of that. So my children are now, my oldest is now 13, my youngest is 14. They are all educated to some extent or the other, and those who are adults are working to some extent or the other, but we are still facing challenges, and we'll talk a bit more about that. So that was our approach. Started off very structured, and in the end it was like, you know, every man for himself a little bit. So okay, so now I think we're going to discuss the B, which is for benefits. I'm going to let Mary take that.
No, there we are. So what was our benefits to home education? In the early days, it was really actually allowing them to progress at their own pace. So particularly for my eldest, he was struggling obviously with reading, struggling with accessing the academic work, but he really loved to be read to. So it was tailoring an approach that worked for him and worked for the whole family. And we just love that freedom, the freedom to have, we quite often actually right up until my kids were, Samuel was probably about 15, 16, we still had read alouds, and it happened in my bed. I'm not one to particularly get out of bed in the morning. So we started schoolwork before I rose. So they'd pile into our bedroom. We had a basket in our bedroom with our morning books in. We'd have a devotional. We'd have some of the read alouds that we were doing. If we were doing a bit further on, when we were doing Mystery of History or some of our Apologia Science, we'd choose, we wouldn't necessarily do that every day, we'd choose one of those. And that was the start of the day. And then we'd have a bit of a break, get up, get dressed, have breakfast, or more brunch really. And then sort of then flow into the day. One of the other things I was thinking about for benefits was that we holidayed during term time, and we were able to have so many fantastic holidays at a price that we wouldn't have been able to afford as a single income family. And being able to go, we used to go to Center Parcs, probably we did that about 9 years, and the price that we used to pay for that compared to the holidays was just a tiny fraction. I think we paid about 250 when it was something like 1,200 if we often went in October, and you know, the October half term would be 4 or 5 times the price. And we'd go with my parents, we'd go with my siblings, up until really their children were about 6 or 7. And then they were stopped from being allowed to take them out of school. But the privilege of just being able to be free and to choose, we would go on holiday about 4 times a year. It was brilliant. And we'd always link it in with what we were doing. So if there was a particular museum we wanted to see, or a particular coastline or something, you know, we'd plan our holiday around that. I mean, one of the ones that I loved was we went to Northern Ireland and did the Giant's Causeway. The only problem that we now have is the youngest child was he was about 8, and apparently he has no memory of it. So he wants to repeat that holiday, which is fab. It was a fabulous one. possibly one of the drawbacks, you know. And we've got them in quite a close order, so you might have to repeat stuff, but really, really good fun. The other benefits was just being able to be outside. You know, particularly in the summer months, we were outside for most of the day, either in the garden. We've got a country park not far from us. We got, we've got permits. We had permits for those places. So we didn't need to worry about paying for parking. We'd paid for an annual pass, and we could just go. We had we still have National Trust memberships, and we'd sometimes join a local attraction. For us in Coventry, Stratford is not far, so for a couple of years we had the Shakespeare houses, we've had farm passes. They make brilliant Christmas presents from relatives, if you can persuade them to do it. And the benefits of being able to do that during school term, fabulous. I mean, I used to giggle a little bit because we'd turn up at an attraction and we'd be there, you know, happily, and then the school group would arrive. And my kids would just go, oh no, school kids. But what's brilliant about school groups, they do a set route and you can just go the other way. And normally these places have lots of space. I find it now quite hilarious as a school teacher taking my class on school trips, and just to see other people's reactions. But the benefits of being able to do that hands-on learning and really to be able to, you know, doing Egyptians, being able to go straight to the museum and have a good look and maybe go back the following week and the following week and really cement that learning is something that schools can't do. We're allowed one trip a term and that's it, if I'm lucky. And for our kids, you know, it's one trip a week. So yeah, brilliant experiences. Yes, I think I'll stop there because I'll link into another one otherwise. Go on, Juliet, over to you.
Okay, so I'm going to just mute Mary as well there. So actually we had another B as well, so it was benefits and blessings. And, you know, I think a lot of what Mary said, yes, you know, the freedom and the flexibility, I've absolutely loved that. Not having to get up for the school run in the morning. When you think of having those babies, how that would have added to stress, or having to get that number of children ready for school. I'm always very thankful. And we're quite, you know, we used to drive past the schools and the parents are waiting outside with under the umbrellas in the rain, and then like just kind of feel, oh, you know, you poor parents, you don't know. But the irony is I now collect my grandson from school every day when he's at school. So sometimes I'm the one with the umbrella now. Anyway, that's what you do for love. So one of the other benefits to me of home education is that you can raise your children to be independent thinkers. So we are a very, very lively, argumentative, opinionated group of people in our family. And I think, you know, often in school you're taught to kind of conform. You have to think the same or you're actually penalized. But in our family, you know, everyone thinks they've got an opinion. And they're very vocal about it, which is great because it kind of helps them when they need to kind of stand their ground later on and to have an opinion and to be able to be confident. The downside is that then when they disagree with you and they argue their own corner, it's not always so nice to be on the receiving end of that. But I think you've got to look at what, you know, I think Alice Camasia once said is, you know, look at who do you want them to be in 5 years' time? You know, do you want them all to be always compliant? And I think in this day and age, you know, you want children who can think for themselves. There's a lot of difficult decisions that you face out there. The other thing is that I've been able to train my children in life skills. So from very early on, and as soon as they were able, they all had jobs to do in the house. So with the result that I barely cook now during the week. I might cook twice a week. I don't unpack the dishwasher ever. I only do laundry for myself and my husband in the house. The children all do their own laundry. I don't hoover most of the time. Someone else does that. They're all been trained to help, and they all have assigned responsibilities in the home. And part of that has been explaining to them how they need to know how to run a home. They need to know how to do these things for their own good. It's part of their training. And that is a big blessing. There might have been a lot of things I got wrong, but that's one thing I got right. And I had a friend, Kathy Coetzee, some of you might know her or remember her, and she always used to say, the whole purpose is to work yourself out of a job. And that's, if you think about how do I work myself out of, working for all these people, you've got to train them and help them to understand that you're a family and everyone contributes, everyone benefits, so everybody should do a share. And the other huge benefit for me was to do with the siblings being able to have a connection and a relationship with each other that they wouldn't have had otherwise. In my own life, when I was a little girl and I had a brother 4 or 5 years older than me, he went off to school when I was little. By the time I went to school, to primary, he actually went off to a boarding school for a couple of years. But then he went into high school. And then by the time I went to high school, he'd left. So I had very, very little relationship with him, and still to this day. But my children are kind of quite intimately involved in each other's lives. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But they've all watched their younger siblings grow up from babies and helped raise them and helped change nappies and, just been able to witness their first words and their first steps and be part of that journey. And if they'd been at school all the time, I think they would have missed out a great deal and wouldn't have had that connection. So my kids fight a lot. I must just say they don't all get on, but they also, on a good day, everyone's great and they're agreeable, or they'll go for walks together, go to the cinema together. My second oldest, Mallory, is a wonderful big sister to my youngest, and she loves to treat them and do things with them, which is very special. So just there's a lot that you can accomplish through home education that school just wouldn't do. That is an absolute benefit and a blessing. So the next letter is the letter C, and this is where we want to talk about community and the importance of community when you're home educating. And Mary can kick that one off.
Oh, brilliant. So this really ties in with our benefits and blessings. And I wouldn't have been able to home educate if it wasn't for my home ed community. We were really blessed when we made the decision that we would home educate. We already had 2 families from a toddler group that we went to that had already made that step. So we were able to sort of go into a very small, already set up group with people that we knew. I needed that probably more than my children. And I would say all the way along, my children are massively social. They enjoy a small group of friends. They've enjoyed our homemade group and the friendships they've got. But ultimately, it was for me. It kept me sane. It enabled me to talk through those difficult days and know that I'm not alone. It was friends that I could just, share the joys as well, just share life. To be honest, for some of our families, our kids were almost like cousins at one stage because we were their family. We've got some people in our group that are not from the UK, so they have no family in the UK. And so we were privileged to become part of their family, which was really lovely. In terms of community and how we established it, we started off with this very small group. We went to a library meeting once a week, very interesting group, really in 2 halves, not that was a problem, just in terms of where families were coming from, but we all got on. But after a year, there was a group of us that were Christians, and actually at the time we just felt that our educational philosophy was quite different, and we'd quite like the opportunity to gather together. And we set up just some very informal meetings at the park, and we'd meet probably once every few weeks. And then after a while, we actually really wanted to make it a bit more of a formal group. And that's when Juliet had sort of moved to the UK during that time. And over about a year, we sort of started what we call CHEW, which is Christian Home Educators Warwickshire. And I think it looks like Juliet's about to share something. And we, again, started very small, started in a group. I'm trying to think if it was Scout hut. I'm trying to think what the first building we went into, and we were there for a couple of years, and we have steadily grown since then. I mean, my James, who's now 16, was probably about 4 when Chew started very informally. So it's been a long time, and the group has really changed, really, actually, from that initial thing, which is great. We're really diverse as to who comes, and what started off as fairly loose structure, you know, we now have some sessions that are quite structured. There's a theme, but there's also the sort of Lego board games, the sessions where people come along. For us, I mean, it has been fantastic. We've celebrated lots of different festivals. We've eaten together. We've done drama together. It's given our family so much more than we would have ever accomplished on our own. I now, coming to the end of Home Ed, we're part of a Mum Heart group. And so there are people in that group who have finished Home Ed, and there are people that have got really little ones, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant to be part of that group, part of that friendship, and to see it still continuing. These are friends that I will hopefully have to the end of my days. I love my Home Ed family, and I just feel really privileged that I've had the chance to have that. So if you don't have that, I know some people are introverted and really struggle with big groups, and that's absolutely fine. But you know, if you can find that 1 or 2 friends, and it benefits your family, it's just fantastic. Over to Juliet.
Yes, so I thought I'd share the slide because I happen to have them up, and I see Anya and Kat peering into the screen to see who they can remember. The whole support group thing is very interesting, because in South Africa, support groups were a little different for me. So support groups were actually run for the parents, not for the children. So you would, and the thing is, in South Africa, people have these like big gardens, and the weather's pleasant a lot of the time. So, and even your houses are quite big. So you'd get together, and the kids would be expected to go off and run and play while the mothers had a natter and shared their problems and their concerns and just supported and encouraged one another. So when I was home educating in the first city we lived in, Durban, we had quite a big network there that used to get together, and we did do things like Christmas parties, but the children were pretty much left to themselves. And then we moved to Pretoria, and I managed to find a group there but it wasn't anything like what I'd had before. And then coming to the UK, initially I had very little network. I just battled to find home educators that we felt we could relate to. So we did find a local group, but my children didn't feel like it was for them. You know, you just didn't feel like you belonged there. And it took us a few years till I finally found Mary. And Mary told me about some of the other people in the area, and we started getting together. And over the years, this network has grown. And our CHEW group, which stands for Christian Home Educators Warwickshire, it's a very inclusive group. Anyone can join as long as they agree to respect our faith. We regularly have up to 60 children now in a session, which is becoming quite hard to manage, but we find it so hard to say no to anybody and to have a waiting list or anything like that. It's just not the spirit of our group. And we've had our ups and downs. It hasn't always been easy, but we've got a very good, strong core team. And I would say that's the real key, is to, so when you start a support group, you need to find people that you're aligned with. And if you don't have a group in your area, you need to think about starting one. I just have to say that. You don't do it even with anyone else in mind. Create something where you would like to be, and anyone who joins you, that's a bonus. So think first of your family and what your needs are, and about creating that a little community with 1 or 2 other people who really align with you, and then it'll grow by itself in its own time. It doesn't have to be big. It's just about finding a supportive community and people that you can call your friends, that you can laugh and cry together, and when you've got challenges they can at least point you in the right direction. And we have got a very good strong core group, and that has actually sustained us through some very difficult situations, sometimes with difficult personalities and that kind of thing, just how to deal with it in a wise way. And we're able to have a culture of welcoming and acceptance. So children eventually also, you know, they might come in for the straight out of school and behave a certain way because they've been schooled a certain way, but over time, with the acceptance and warmth, they develop friendships that will also last them a long, long time. We have things like a yearly camp, family camp, which is fantastic. We love it. We have regular mums outings. So we do mums nights sometimes, where we go out for a meal or do something together just to relax. We support one another when babies are being born or somebody's ill. We do meals, and we are a community to one another. So I would say that community is really important. And if you don't have a community, just really, I would say, pray about it, look around you, see who's around you, connect with people as much as you can, because it will sustain you through the difficult times, and you can carry one another. So the next thing, what I want to just add to that is I've got the website called Head Hub, Home Education Advocacy Hub. I have an article on there on how to start a support group with sharing some of the things that we've learned. So I can perhaps just point you in the direction of that if you want to know more. So we're going to go to our next letter of the alphabet, which is D. I'm just going to stop the share there. And D is for dangers and doubts. So where are the areas where what are potential dangers in home education, things to look out for? Where did you have doubts? What were kind of difficult things to deal with? And so then I'll let Mary get on with that.
Brilliant. So very much in the early days, I would have this cycle, and it would go something like this. I'm loving this. This is fantastic. I really, really enjoy this. No, I hate this. I hate it. Let's look at schools. I cannot cope. And to be honest, that was probably a cycle of about 2 years in that. And to a certain extent, at various times in home ed, I've had that I can't do this. What helped me was my community, knowing that I'm not alone. Also just experience, life experience. The more we home educated, the more confident I became, the more that actually over time, as you see your children progressing, and that actually they're not going to end up as these failures, that actually they've got some skills, that you've seen them learn themselves. You've seen, you know, little things like, as Juliet said, them playing with their siblings, overcoming a difficulty, and you know, making that academic progress as well in whichever form that they can. And as time went, I was able to then just stand confidently and say, actually, we've made the right choice. It's absolutely, you know, we've done okay. For one of us, one time, actually quite early on, we've always had local authority officers come to our home. We chose to do that because Samuel, my eldest, had a statement of special educational needs that he got when he was in school, and we wanted to maintain that. They're quite hard to get. That's something that we didn't want to lose. It didn't really matter while we were home edding. It was just a piece of paper. But certainly the first officer that we had a couple of years in, he really affirmed that this was our calling as a family, and that he could just see how happy my children were, and that really helped with those doubts. A bit later on, I shared yesterday in the literacy one, my son is obviously part of this statement, which then was converted into an educational healthcare plan. He was seen by the educational psychologist, and we were told that there is no school setting in Coventry that could accommodate Samuel's needs, and that what we'd done was the right thing for him. So that was brilliant. That was quite near the end of Samuel's journey, but it was really nice to know that we'd heard correctly And this is actually what God wanted us to do for our family. One of the dangers that Juliet and I were talking about was burnout. And it is so easy, particularly now. When we started Home Ed about 14 years ago, there was one group, and it wasn't even in Coventry. No, sorry, there was one group in Coventry. There was one group just outside of Coventry, and they both happened once a month. And so you had these, you know, very sporadic groups. We sort of ended up exploring ones all over the place. I ended up having to have a rule that we couldn't be in the car longer than we were at the activity, because we were driving all over the place. And it's that, and then as time went on, more and more activities started happening locally. And so you go, oh yeah, we'll go and do pottery, or we'll go and do sports, or we'll go do drama, and you literally, but we were still trying to do things at home as well. And the sort of trying to pack it all in, as well as, you know, still run things at church. And I'm part of an autism support group and still do that, still meet friends, and life just got on top of us. And for about a year, I was really struggling to try and keep life going. And at the end of the year, my husband and I sat down. So actually, one thing I will say, and it probably fits in benefits, is every year, me and my husband have sat down at the end of the academic year and thought, you know, what's worked, what hasn't, what do we need to change? And at the end of this particular year, it was, I need to be at home more. And so from there onwards, I made the decision that we were at home for 2 days a week, which was brilliant. It just meant, especially things like household chores, like the washing, it just meant that there were 2 days when those things got done, and kids could really get into the books that we were doing. And the other thing I did was we tried not to get to anything too early in the morning, so that we had a bit of time at home before we went out. That sort of changed as we went on, and certainly as my children moved into teenage years. I know some people's teenagers are the same. Their desire to go to home ed groups just went. They were happy to go and talk to their friends. They did not want to do activities. That, you know, they had no interest in that. And to be honest, towards GCSE years, they did a few subject-specific groups, so they didn't mind going to those. And the youngest, probably another danger that I found in having more than one child, was that we often tailored our home ed style to my style and my eldest 2 children. We all love books, we love reading. The youngest one, not so much. And it really wasn't until he was, it's probably the last sort of 2-3 years, he really enjoys art. I can't draw at all. And just actually me and crafts don't really happen. And I could see 2 members laughing at that one. So to facilitate James with art, I actually had to make a really conscious effort, and we ended up paying for some one-to-one lessons for him, and then he was able to go to a group. And actually that's something that he really wants to pursue at college, so I'm glad we got that. But it's one of those things, it meant he didn't get it earlier on, and but it's life. And you know, there's no point feeling guilty about it. It's just one of those things. But yeah, it is possibly one of our dangers. I was going to say, one of the things I think Juliet might talk on a bit more, but I've had to actually talking about my husband about our home ed journey, and Juliet and I were saying it's one of the dangers is that you both really need to be on the same page. You are standing out, you're not doing something that's normal. In terms of what the rest of the country are doing. Most people send their children to school. Some of the stuff that you may want to buy is quite expensive. Some of the activities you might want your children to go to, maybe some sacrifices. And so to be on the same page as your spouse is really, really important where you can, because it just really helps that even when things go wrong, when you buy really expensive curriculum and you love it and that's what you want to do, and then it just doesn't work, if you're on the same page, then you can both go, that's a lesson learned. let's just put that to one side and move on, without having to have those disagreements over that. So I fortunately have a very laid back husband, which does help. He just let things pass him by. But yeah, I'll let Juliet go to that one. Yes, go on, over to you. I won't talk too much, I promise.
Okay, we are actually nearly out of time. So I'm going to quickly, Mary, if you don't mind, I'll just quickly cover maybe the last two things. So just another thing under the dangers and doubts is just look at your children's giftings and be sure to prioritize at least something for them, for each one, so that you find money is often tight. So, and sometimes you can end up focusing on just one child. So just think about each child and maybe prioritize one thing that is special for them to do and for them to pursue, you know, whether it be music or art or sport or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to just hop on to the last two. So the E is for encouragement, and that is about seeking out an environment of encouragement and creating an environment of encouragement. I would actually love to pull up a slide if I can find it. Just some scriptures, because it's so hard. I want to see if I can find it. When you can feel really lonely. This isn't a very good slide, so I'm just going to read it. It's consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And there's so many, there are many sort of scriptures like that. It's good to hang on to a couple of them to keep you through difficult times and to seek to encourage yourself. And then the last letter is F, which is for faith. And I might have, I want to say that all of my children, you know, they're all different and they're all unique, and some of them are still getting there, but I think you also have to have faith in them and faith that they want good things for themselves and will work towards it. You need to bring them alongside and help them to see their own future, and so that you can encourage them to pursue what they want to pursue as adults. As they go into their teen years, you want to engage with them and help them to make good decisions, but remind them that their future is theirs, so that they can also not perhaps dwell in the past or dwell on failure and dwell on the things that have gone wrong, but they can actually see how they can be responsible for their own destiny in so many ways. I was going to share this one quote, but it's not a very well, I'll share it anyway. It's just the resolution is really bad on it. So let me see if it'll let me. It's just a word of encouragement. So give thumbs up if you can see it. Okay, Kat can kind of see it. Okay, kind of. Okay, so it says only God can turn a mess into a message, a test into a testimony, a trial into a triumph, and a victim into a victory. And I just want to encourage you, you know, we do have to go, unfortunately, because we've got another session coming up right after this on the same account. But Mary and I are both we've both had sort of interesting different journeys. We've both had to overcome in various areas, and we'd be happy to talk you through anything. I'm going to quickly look at the chat. So burnout is definitely, you know, something that can happen. It can be a danger if you put too much pressure on yourself. I did want to say, create margin for yourself, physical margin, emotional margin, mental margin, and financial margin. Don't push yourself to the edge. Give yourself some space to breathe. Caroline Caudle's quote, don't dig up in doubt what you planted in faith. Keep watering those bulbs. You know, those bulbs you planted deep in the ground in the cold season. Keep watering them. You don't see what's coming for a while, but one day the flower will be there. And Katie said, what would you do differently if you had your time again? I'm going to say very quickly, I would have put plans in place. I wouldn't have just blithely gone into situations thinking everything was going to be okay. I would have I would have kind of given myself worst case scenario situations and made decisions about how I was going to deal with a worst case scenario. Mary, do you have a last word there?
Just very quickly, worry less, particularly those early years. It all came together. And the hours I spent worrying about whether I'd bought the right books or doing it in the right approach, and just trusting God and just to keep going. I was just going to say the last letter was faith, but maybe we'll bring that up in chat about the things that we were going to share on that one, if we need to go.
Well, that's kind of also just about having faith in, if you're a Christian, you have faith in God, having faith in the fact that children will learn, regardless of situations, they will learn, because that's naturally in them. And if you can have faith in your own abilities as a parent and your own instincts, mostly they're good ones. So I would add that, but we're going to have to go.
Yeah.
So please find us on the app or Facebook or whatever, and I'm also always happy to chat over the phone. So bless you all. Thank you for your encouraging words.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
awesome.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.